And welcome back to day 36 of Survivor 46. And 46, Wendell just won Survivor Ghost Island. I'm going to tell y'all right now. I know I said yesterday that I hit a wall and I was very bored. It very much continued today. This is not an easy watch, not because of anything problematic. It's just so boring. But today we're joined for the first time in 2 years by Ryan. Ryan, you helped me cover 2 seasons before when I did 42 and 42, and we have you back for the first of 2 times, I believe, this time. What were your thoughts of Ghost Island the first time you watched it, and have those opinions changed throughout the years?
All right, so when Ghost Island first aired, I was a little boy. I was like 14, and I remember like it was just one of those moments, right? Obviously, and we'll get into this further. The gameplay as it progressed isn't exactly the most dynamic, but the ending is very memorable, and that kind of shapes the way that the season is kind of viewed to this day. So I remember watching it back then, like seeing the tie vote was like this big thing, and now like as years have passed, I've kind of been able to maybe focus on some of the other there are a little bright spots about
Oh no, he froze.
the season. So I'm excited to get into that. And I'll just preface this by saying that uh, I'll just preface this by saying that I know not every season can be the ideal season, but at the end of the day, like every season does have something to provide. So I'm excited to kind of get into those little things that I liked about that maybe people might have overlooked.
Yeah, and I will say this. This is the first season that I have done this time around where I haven't been able to really latch on to anything that I'm like, wow, that's exciting. Probably until Final Tribal. And I in my head this time I kept comparing it to Plow for me. So for Palau, for me, once the allure of the Oolong tribe being decimated goes away, other time that I've watched Palau, it's just been like, okay, yeah, like this is all it is. It's not that fun this time around. I could say the same cases for Ghost Island, where like I was never like a big Ghost Island person to begin with, but once the allure of oh yeah, at the end it's going to tie gets taken away, this season actually just happens with no real type of craziness. And I feel like that's what makes it so. And I'm not one of these people that like, oh, well, it reminds me of older seasons because I love older seasons. For me, it's just, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say positively about it because I couldn't vibe with it this time around. So, what is it about Ghost Island for you that you can look at and say, okay, these are some of the good things that happen?
Yeah. So one thing I think that a lot of people obviously like it's very forefront of the edit, but I think a lot of people overlook is that this is one of the very few seasons where like we have a duo that not only like makes it to the end together, because we have seen duos get to the end together that are running the game, but it's also a season where like both of these both of these players quite literally have equal win equity. So even though as you're getting through the post merge, it seems really dull, it's in the back of your head like I'm sure both these guys are going to get to the end. It's just a matter of who's it going to be. And I think something that a lot of people complain about with this
Uh-oh.
season. However, I feel like I've always been one to say that like the editing should be more so accurate of the gameplay than it should be like an even representation of everyone. And I feel like having those two frontrunners at the forefront kind of keeps our mind on that thought of, well, I wonder who's going to take it at the end because it has to be one of them.
Yeah, and I will say that it's very similar to the All Stars in that aspect, as for me at least, where yeah, you have a duo that is very much the center of attention the entire season. They don't even bother giving anyone else screen time this time around. And I feel like if you enjoy duos, if you enjoy that type of relationship, then this is the season for you. If you are looking to connect with other people, which I very much do when I'm doing rewatches like this, where I'm looking for other people to latch on to get their stories. This is one of those seasons where I can't like Donathan, I feel like would be the only person for me this time around that it's like, okay, yeah, Donathan, I can rock with Donathan. I appreciate how much he tries to antagonize them from like 8 or 7 until he gets voted out. I think it's very similar to like Spencer and Cass doing that with Tony and Kagayan. It's very similar to people trying to provoke Ben last season in HHH, where Donathan's he's just saying whatever he wants, and Wendell and Dom both approach it differently enough, but they still both come off as like kind of butthurt that he is saying this stuff about him. So what did you think about Donathan as a character this season and Donathan as a game player?
Yeah, I really liked Donathan as a part of this season. I think he's one of the very few players, obviously, who really tried to at least set something in motion against the two very clear dominant frontrunners of the season. And I think something very interesting about Donathan is I feel like he was put into the game, obviously not on a great tribe, and he's kind of entering the merge, and he's just like one of those examples of like, I almost see him like as some new era players like Owen or players like Romeo, who really just like tried to get something going, but just couldn't take down the big other people in front of them, just couldn't get other people to take those shots with them. And I think he has a lot of potential for a return if obviously there are a lot of other people who I think could be returned first. But I think he's a great example of somebody who like, even someone like Jake, who like just tried after to just get something in motion, but just couldn't get other people with him to take the shot. And I think it's brings up a very interesting point of like, just because you can't make those shots doesn't necessarily make you a bad player. It's just that the other people with you might not understand the importance of making those moves. I think he really kind of drew the raw end of the stick in terms of who he was kind of paired up with in this cast.
Yeah, I agree. And that is something that, like you compared him to Jake, very fair comparison, because yes, at a certain point, he is trying to make things happen. And it's just not, and the fact that him and Laurel are the last two people from his OG tribe, I do think is a testament to both of their games. And we're going to talk about Laurel because I do feel like people unfairly look at her as just a follower this entire season, when I do think there is merit to her game. Now, I also have big qualms with it, but I did appreciate watching Laurel this time around. And I do appreciate watching Donathan almost every time I watch this season, because he is a fun antagonist to what we're being taught to be the protagonists of Dom and Wendell. This is the Dom and Wendell show. I think that Donathan's backstory is great. I think the way he goes out is great. Laurel. So Laurel is the last person from her OG tribe, a very notorious tribe as far as challenge performance, and they just cannot gain the right footing. Pre-swap, swap, second swap, going into the merge. And Laurel somehow is able to stand there at the end despite Navidi Strong. And that is, I know that's a running gag about this season, is the fact that it's Navidi Strong. And I tweeted this out earlier, and I was like, I was going to take a drink every time someone says Navidi Strong or keeping Navidi Strong. I was only really drank like maybe 12 to 14 times today, and there was earlier in the merge. It didn't really like that storyline kind of died out as it continued. What were your thoughts on Laurel this time around, or just any time that you've watched the season?
Yeah, I feel like it was very interesting watching Laurel the first time, because in the preseason, obviously, Jeff was very high on her, and she was kind of portrayed as like this stealthy, sneaky assassin. And so when it came like later into the season, she was kind of getting aligned with Dominic and Wendell, and she showed that she was loyal. I thought for sure that somewhere, at least down the line, she was going to be kind of itching to make that big move against him eventually. And so watching it like in the post-merge, just time and time after again, she's approached with the possibility of now's the time. And she's just like, now's the time. I think it speaks to like, one, how good Dom and Wendell are as players, that they're able to keep her so loyal despite the very obvious thing that they're way better players and they're like running the game. But also like, I think it shows like a lot of things that I've heard survivors say after the game, which is that like they always wish that like they had made a move sooner. Like they wish that they didn't wait for their instincts to kick in. I think this kind of plays in here where you just watch the final tribal. and she's pretty much just neglected. It serves the ultimate punishment of making her vote. So I think it was really interesting watching kind of Laurel through the season. Just it shows almost like what not to do in terms of waiting to make moves.
Yeah, and I will say this. At Final Travel, she did try to make a case. She tried to make a case that, hey, I knew that I could have, I chose to be here with them because, this person from my OG tribe, I felt like I could have made these moves and my bigger move because I knew that I wasn't in anyone's long-term plans. And if I'm not in anyone's long-term plans, why would I flip on these people? It's you saying that she's like Jake is so like I didn't even think about that watching this time around, but it's so true because Jake was was constantly trying to do things. Oh well, you said that he was like Jonathan, but I would say that Laurel's kind of like Jake too, as far as at a certain point, she is pretty much just swimming up Schitt's Creek without a paddle. There's really no way she can win at a certain point, only because she either goes with these two to the end and loses, or she flips on one of them, in which case these people over here don't have them in her long-term plans. I think at a certain point, maybe like Jonathan could like have her, and yeah, once the two of them left, yes, probably. But at that point, you're so outnumbered that you can't really do anything. So I don't disagree with what Laurel did this season. I just think that she ended up in such a shit situation that she couldn't really I won't say adjust, because she adjusted very well, because someone said she was played on all 4 tribes this season. She couldn't really find like the person or persons that she actually would have a chance against. She ran into one of, if not the most dominant dominant duo in the history of the game. Do you feel like Laurel gets a bad rap, from the larger Survivor community?
I'll say yes and no. There are two sides to it. I feel like on one side, I think it just goes to show, and I think Jake has said this himself, like it just shows that like sometimes like you're just dealt a raw end of the stick and there really isn't much you can do. I feel like there is a lot of luck involved in Survivor. And if just the people you end up with on your starting tribe, on your swap tribe, just don't really appeal to maybe your qualities as a player or your desires further on in the game, it might not just work. And had you been paired up with someone maybe different, who was thinking maybe more so in the future, long term, then might have worked out better for you. At the same time, though, like hindsight is 2020, and I feel like obviously now that the season is ended and she's a 0 vote finalist, I feel like it would have definitely made sense for her to say, you know what, like maybe I am not involved in these long-term plans, but instead of riding with these two guys to basically a guaranteed death, I might as well at least try to work with someone else and maybe make something happen. Like remember Jake and I don't know why I'm mentioning Jake so many times, but like Jake in 45, when he was trying to save Caleb, like he said, like I have to take control of this game. Like I don't want to just be a follower. And he tries to make that move to save Caleb, and obviously it doesn't work, and he gets put on the bottom for the rest of the game. But at least he tried, right? So I think it shows both sides of like, sometimes you make the moves and it doesn't work out. Sometimes you choose not to make the moves and it also doesn't work out. So there really is no way to say like, oh, well, he should have done this, should have done that. So I do think she does get a bit of a bad rep. I would say if I was in her position, I would have tried to at least stir something up. But I do understand why she felt like she didn't really have any options moving forward with anyone else other than the two people who've proven to be so loyal to her.
Yeah, her and Jonathan are like this, where, if you want to talk about the same, different sides of the same coin, they're the two last, oh my God, orange tribes. There are only 2 left. I don't know why I can't pronounce that right now. But they're the only 2 left. And Jonathan is shown to be someone that is trying his best at a certain point to try to change the game. Now, by the time he tries to do that, the game is pretty much over for him. And on the other hand, you have Laurel, who doesn't, but still sits at the end. And I don't think that Jonathan, like, I don't disagree with how Jonathan was going about it, because he still made Final 5 and he's antagonizing the duo from Final 7 on, I believe. He's sitting at Tribal telling Dom, yeah, we don't have to talk. And he's sitting at camp and he's telling Wendell, yeah, I feel like Dom's just going to put me on the jury because he knows I'm going to vote for him, or this, that, and the other. And like, oh, so you don't want to go to the finals with us? And he's like, no, I'm just saying, I'm just putting it out there that this is how it is. I think Laura, and you can compare the two of them to Dom and Wendell, because Wendell was more, and he even admits he was more of the passive person in the duo, while Dom is out there, being flashy, and according to some of the jurors here, saying that he was being a little aggressive. You know, it's the same thing as Donovan and Laurel, where Donovan is more of the vocal person, and Laurel is kind of taking a backseat. And I don't think that there is anything wrong with either way you approach the game, as long as it's done with respect. I did feel so horrible for Dom here. It's very similar to Mike Turner in 42, where Mike Turner has a moment during Final Tribal where he realizes that the jury felt a type of way about him, even though he felt like he was, doing what he was doing. Dom here, you could tell, hey, like I never meant to disrespect y'all. I didn't mean to give off that impression, and I did feel that was the case. I do feel like that was the truth when he was saying that. Did you get dick vibes from him this season? Did you get like he was trying to be too controlling?
I mean, as a viewer watching from home, it's obviously really entertaining to watch someone play like that. And I feel like had I been on the island with him, I would have probably viewed it in the same way of like, I can respect really good gameplay, even if it does come off as a bit theatrical or like brash or callous. However, I do understand that there are other people out there, and this is Ghost Island, let's be honest, pretty recruit heavy. There are going to be people out there who might not be able to appreciate that level of, I guess, showmanship to the same degree as someone like you or me. So I personally didn't get like dick vibes from him, but at the end of the day, like the most important part of playing a good Survivor game is understanding the people you're with. And, obviously we see Dominic from the very beginning gets into conflict with people. It's just maybe just like a personality disconnect. But I think that's something you should have recognized earlier on, is that, maybe this group I'm with might not appreciate or like this way I'm playing. So I was hoping maybe he could adjust that, but he didn't. And I guess that was his downfall.
I would say the two people that he had the biggest conflicts with, well, at least from what I remember about today, God, were Bradley, who sucked, and Chris Noble, who did vote for him to win the game. So, and I do agree with you. Like, everyone has their different reasoning for doing things, but like just off the top of my head, the only two people that I can think of that were like that Dom was more aggressive towards would be two people, and one of them voted for him to win, and the other one was a pre-merger. Thank goodness, because I don't know if I could have dealt with Bradley at the merge. Past,
I'll say, like, it does bring up an interesting point, because like you see Dom is fighting with Chris, and that's like kind of like a very big part of the story of the show. And then Chris turns around and votes for him. However, there are other people who are also kind of put off by that. Maybe not directly their conflict, but just that attitude in general. It might not just extend to just Dom and Chris, their kind of own argument. It might like rub other people, like observers, the wrong way. And if like I was there, like I personally wouldn't mind if Dom wants to have a conflict with me, that's fine. But if I see him, maybe getting into that kind of argument with someone else, I look at that and I'm like, well, is this really good gameplay? Like, is this something I really want to reward if he is getting to these conflicts with other people? So it brings up a good point of like, well, how much is it really just a one-on-one more so than it's everyone is watching this, so you better like watch out what you say.
yeah, I do agree. I do agree, and I do really like Dom this season. I think based off of Final Tribal performance, I would have had a hard time voting between all three. But like, if I'm being realistic, voting between the two. And that's only from a 43-minute edited show. Being out there, I feel like maybe it could have been different. But from what we're shown, I feel like I would have had a hard time voting between the two of them. Outside the three, and this is one of the big problems that Ghost Island runs into, is outside the two, basically, the show is very all over the place as far as the edit. And I said this about HHH yesterday, and I'm saying it again today. I turned on this season last night, and I looked at the cast, and I'm like, I honestly do not remember. Not I won't say half, because that's not true, but there were a lot of people this season that I'm like, I don't even remember your face. And that's hard for me, who has now done this 3 different times and seen the season, once before that. I've seen this season enough that I should recognize at least everyone's face, even if I don't recognize your name. I could not. And there are 20 people. There are 20 people in an all newbie season, and I feel like that's one of the that the season just kind of drags on. It's because there are so many people that you don't even get time to attach yourself to. I feel like Jacob Derwin is probably the only real exception. Maybe second Stephanie. She gets some fun screen time. But Jacob Derwin's like the biggest character for the first episode. Um, do you feel like because they knew where the game was going, the editors, they knew it was going to be a tie, they just kind of said, "Hey, fuck it, we're just going to neglect everyone else this season, and we're only going to focus on these two because when they tie, we want it to make sense to the larger audience." Or do you just feel like they were the two most entertaining people, which I don't agree with, but why do you think this season is edited the way that it is?
I think it's a very interesting topic, right? It kind of almost becomes like this philosophical thing of, well, what makes a good edit, right? Is it everyone gets represented equally, or is it, well, the gameplay should be reflected in the edit? And I think the route that the editors decided to take, especially with the tie at the end of the season, is, if somebody maybe didn't really contribute that much, why really give them a bigger voice when we could be giving that screen time to really like big pivotal things that are going to be attributed to the future winner and runner up at the end of it. Like a lot of these like dull characters that get picked off in the early post merge, you might feel upset that, like, I didn't really get to know these people. I don't even remember their faces. And it's just kind of like watching one unknown person go out after the other. But it's not, for me, I've always viewed it as not so much as like episode by episode, but more so like appreciating the whole story. And I think like by the end of it, those episodes might have been a bit of a slog to not know those people that well. But by the end of it, you at least kind of have a bigger view of the gameplay of the people that are really running things. I feel like, at least in my opinion, it's always more important to show an accurate representation of what's actually happening in the game versus, giving somebody like, I won't say names, but giving someone screen time who's maybe not really adding much to the gameplay. Like, why show what they really have to say?
Yeah, and I would say that I sort of agree with you. And I will say I'll say this also. When I looked at the cast last night, I was trying to like remember who the jurors were, which once again, I don't have that problem with virtually any other season. And I'm like, oh yeah, this person. I was convinced that Morgan and Brendan were both on the jury. I was convinced they both made the merge and that they were both on the jury. So then when they went home, I'm just like, oh, okay. Maybe I don't remember. And it's because this season is just, and when people say that Redemption Island is a very boring season, they're right. But there are still things that happen in that season that can be like, oh yeah, I remember Rice Wars for some reason. I remember Francesca versus Philip. I remember Philip's underwear getting buried. Everything that has to do with Philip, basically. This season, I remember the tie and I remember the flashback. The flashbacks are the best part of this season. And we're going to talk about the twist of Redemption Island in a bit. But is there a moment to you, and we won't talk about the tie, every season has that one moment or those two moments or whatever. Does this season have a moment for you specifically?
Well, I mean, if you're going to bring up funny Redemption Island moments, I think we have to mention the so much like comedy that is this merge episode of this season. We get two like all-time great voting confessionals, which cannot be forgotten. And I love the dialogue between Donathan and Wendell. Like you were mentioning, Donathan just saying whatever he wants to say, and the whole like bro exchange. Like, this could have been used on you, bro. Oh, like whatever, bro. I
Yeah.
thought that was funny, just a funny moment, just funny banter. And I just love how like kind of like the in-game like conflict between these two people can like kind of like culminate in like a funny moment for us as viewers. I like that.
Okay.
Obviously, yeah, we get
No,
an
no,
amazing Jacob Derwin. Awesome.
the Chris Noble, both Dom and Wendell's voting confessional for Chris Noble, like you mentioned. Yeah, I'll say yeah. That is a moment. That is a moment, and and I thought the last food eating challenge, the gross food eating challenge, the delicacy challenge, was in Cambodia. until that episode happened today, I was like, oh yeah, they finished after Cambodia. We never see it again. And then it happened today. It's like, well, what? And Angela wins. And Angela is another person. I was convinced she was the same person as the second runner up in Edge of Extinction. They just, in my head, they are the same person. And so I'm sitting there, I'm like, wait, doesn't Angela make the end? But that doesn't make any sense because Laurel makes it to the end. I don't understand what's going on. Um, Going to the twist, and I've said this enough over the last 5-ish days because we are now in the era where Survivor really much, very much like pigeonholes their cast into the themes of the season. They feel like to really hammer home these twists. And this twist, I know I said that Millennials versus Gen X was very annoying, and I know I said Game Changers came off as very corny. This is the corniest of the themes that we get right now. Ghost Island as a concept, I enjoy. When Jacob goes there for the first time and he's looking at all the snuffers and he's looking at the idols and all that, I thought that was a very fun moment, especially watching it like this, where it's like, oh man, this is 35 days of my life. But I feel like the execution is where it really it's where it shoots itself in the foot. So what did you think of the concept of Ghost Island, and why do you think that, I mean, unless you think that it's good, why do you think it failed so horribly as a concept?
Yeah, so I am mostly in a similar boat as you, where I really love the concept, but the execution could have been a lot better. And I will maybe mention some ways I think could have been better. But just kind of getting into the twist, I love the fact that they have a season like revolved around like past Survivor mistakes. I think even the gameplay in this season reflects that. And I love that they brought all the old stuff back. That was really cool to see as fans of the show. But also, one thing, they do not need to show Eric in the very first clip. Like, leave that man alone. He's been through
alone. And then they drag him out for the finale. He's like, hey, you remember Eric and James? Do you?
What I would actually like to know is, do you think Eric was just sitting at home watching the new season of Survivor, and then he sees his face come up and he's like, wait a minute, I never agreed to that. Like,
yeah, they better pay me. They better pay me. So, but back to it.
Yeah, I think the reason why, honestly, it failed so, I wouldn't say failed so miserably. I do think there are some pros to it in the season, but I think the reason why it failed in this context is honestly and I don't want to blame the cast, but I do think it is the cast. Like in a season where the cast was playing a bit more dynamically, I do think a lot of these twists could have worked, because it almost reminded me of the new era where we get players going to islands and constantly have to be thinking about, oh, did this person get an advantage? Is this person lying? Do they, maybe we need to vote this person out because they might have something? I think it brings up a really interesting, it was kind of before its time, but I think the way the gameplay worked out didn't really support the idea of bringing advantages in the game. It didn't really change the gameplay itself. And I do think there are some ways that it could have been kind of changed to maybe make the gameplay a bit more dynamic.
And Probst does say in the finale, up until a certain point, he was like, oh yeah, only one of the advantages have actually been used correctly this season out of 9. It's like, do you understand how bad that is, Jeff? That only one of these things and he keeps going with well, I guess they must be cursed then. That's the only reason that these things aren't working, is because they're cursed. As someone that doesn't believe in curses, it's corny on that alone, but I feel like they really try to nail it home that these things are actually cursed, and that's the only, to the point where the extra vote, what gets used and then gets used again because it doesn't work. I think it was the extra vote. Yeah. It's like, oh, it didn't work. We're gonna add back because this time. And it's like, have you guys already ran out of previous seasons things that you have to reintroduce something that you already introduced in the season
from a player that's still in the game?
Yes, and it's frustrating because I know we're beating a dead. It's true. The concept of Ghost Island is something that it's very similar to the concept of One World, I enjoyed as well. Put them on the same island. Have people that know how to play. But like, the concept of One World was pretty fun. The concept of Ghost Island is fun. The problem is they probably can't do it again because they used all of they got all the cursed stuff out of the way. Yes, I
Still
guess
cursed.
Culpepper's urn and Colby's urn are still out there somewhere, and I think that might be it. But I feel like they really dropped the ball with how they did, and it's watching it this time, I realized that from 36 on, there is some type of, with the exception of David versus Goliath, and that's it. With the exception of David versus Goliath, there's some type of y'all are gonna fuck off over here for a bit deal. So after David versus Goliath, we've got Edge of Extinction. Okay. Oh, we've got Island of the Idols. Okay, cool. Winners is War. We got Edge of Extinction again. And then 41 through 46, we've got the Summit. And I think the worst versions of this are probably in Island of the Idols and Ghost Island, where you can get sent to Ghost Island and just, oh, okay, you can't do anything today. Sorry. And that happens a lot. It happens a lot this season. It's like, oh, well, I guess I'm just going to sit here for the rest of the time. Go ahead.
I agree. That's like probably the biggest issue I have with Ghost Island is the fact that like the players don't necessarily get to choose whether they want to play or not. If they can't play, then, well, they're just laying in a little hut with snuffers over their head until they get picked up by the boat and then go back to camp. I would love to see, especially on a season that's like so defined by like stagnant gameplay and people not playing, like why send someone to an island with their, thinking of the possibility that, I might get somebody that could change the game, only to tell them you can't play today. So I was really
sorry, you can't do anything today, and you're just gonna have to chill. That's just one thing. This just goes into how they really dropped the ball with this twist. And I do feel like the person that made it the most exciting got voted out second. Jacob Derwin, who I know comes from the LRG community of the Survivor fandom. He survives one episode, or no, he doesn't survive one episode. He gets voted out at the end of the first episode, second boot. What were your thoughts on Jacob? Because in a cast of like this, Jacob is someone that does stand out. In a bad way, but like he's fun. He was fun for the hour and a half that he's here. What were your thoughts on Jacob?
I think Jacob is like an all-time great character, up there with Zane, up there with Jelinski, like the great all-time like premier flameouts. I think like a lot of people were giving him a lot of heat coming out of the season. As with a lot of fans that go on the show, I feel like maybe people thought he didn't represent the superfan community as well as
he does. Right? Those people are hypocrites because they would do the exact same shit if they went out there.
Yeah. And you know what? Jacob maybe taught future fans a lesson on what not to do, so they can at least appreciate him for that. But I think like he's just so like compelling. I know people are saying like, the premiere was just all Jacob. He gets 15 confessionals in one episode. And, like I believe he's in like the upper half in terms of like screen time in the edit. Yeah. Which is crazy for a premiere boot on a 20-person cast is just crazy. But I think it just goes to show like the gameplay and like the character moments on a season like this are going to take precedence when you have people in the post-merge who are just kind of sitting, not really doing much, just waiting to get picked off. Someone like Jacob to kind of maybe kickstart the season in like this spectacular burnout is just so fun for me. So I love Jacob, and he doesn't deserve all the hate, although he
doesn't. He is exactly what super fans would do. A lot of the super fans would do out there, just immediately just trying to play as hard as possible because they got to make big moves. This kid went through the rice looking for stuff. He goes to I keep kind of want to call it the Edge of Extinction or Island of the Idols. He goes to Ghost Island. He gets the legacy advantage. He sends it to Morgan. He comes back. He has this fake idol, and he gets clocked, I think, by Brendan. Brendan goes, this guy's a super fan, and he doesn't bring back the parchment that this is with. Immediately gets clocked. And he's still, he's still trying to make these crazy. And he tells Stephanie, oh, yeah, it's fake. Like, it's so funny. It's such a fun moment. And the fact that they lose the first challenge and he gets sent to Ghost Island, and he said it's all part of the plan, and Gonzalez gets voted out first. Then she gets some time, I guess. But we get more time to spend with Jacob. It's like, oh man, maybe this is the opportunity he needs to survive longer into the season because he didn't get voted out first. And then all of a sudden, he gets voted out second because when they lose again, and he was like, I guess I'll go. And they're like, we're going to send Donathan. It's like, well, yeah, you're fucked. You are so screwed. Besides the parchment thing, did you think it was a good idea to make that fake idol to like, or do you think that if he just said, hey, I sent this advantage to Morgan or I sent it to someone on the other tribe because that's what it was, do you think that the truth would have been better, or do you feel like you would have probably done what Jacob did?
I mean, in my opinion, and I've thought about this a lot, like at least if I were like on Survivor, a very big thing for me is like maintaining a good impression. So for him to come right out of the gate and like the first 3 days on the island and say, hey everyone, I have an idol, and then to just even making yourself like a notable figure, just so public and like loud and like clumsy, and just making your presence known, not necessarily in the best way. Even just saying like Malolo is the greatest tribe of all time after you lose, like why do that? Like it's just not necessary. It's like how people in the game, there's no reason for that. It only like makes you look stupid in front of everyone else. So I think like I don't know. He did a lot of things wrong, but I still love him.
Yeah, if you want to talk about curses and jinxes, which once again I don't believe in, but Jacob jinxed the shit out of this tribe because he said that I think 3 different times in the premiere episode, and they don't win until right before the merge. I'm pretty sure. I think they may have won another one in there, but I can't remember. I know they won the right one right before the merge because that's where Bradley goes home. Outside of Jacob, pre-merge, I understand that people have certain folks that they do enjoy this season. I think that Bradley he's a pre-merge villain. I won't say he's a good pre-merge villain, but he's there and he's a pre-merge villain. I think that Stephanie's hot, both of them. Morgan gets the legacy advantage, and it doesn't really pay off for anything. There are probably other people that get voted out pre-merge. James was there, and Brendan was there. Why is this? What is the problem with this cast for you? Why do you think that people are so down on this cast?
So I think this is like a really like top heavy cast, and by top heavy, I don't even mean like Dom and Wendell. I literally mean like there are like probably half the cast that I think like are like good cast members that like just like got kind of screwed over by the way the game works out. And sometimes that happens. The game doesn't always go your way. The boot order might not always like work out. And I think there's like a prime case of that where like I pretty much believe like at least like almost everyone that's voted out in the pre-merge is basically like a better character or player than pretty much everyone in the post-merge.
The merge. Yeah, I mean, I won't deny that. Brendan was, I would say that Stephanie was out there like trying to wheel and deal. So I feel like if Jacob had found footing, he could have done something. I felt like Gonzalez. I want to talk about Chelsea because Chelsea, she is basically purple Chelsea this season, ironically. I got a lot of, so watching her this time, I kept thinking about Kelly Wigglesworth in Cambodia and Alexis Jones in Micronesia, where both of them, we have to hear from other people playing, Alexis is a threat if she gets to the end. She's playing really hard, and if Alexis does this and Alexis does that, she's going to get to the end. And we are not seeing any of it. Wigglesworth in Cambodia, people keep saying, oh man, Wigglesworth, she's good with everyone. She's wheeling and dealing. She's doing this, that, and the other. It's like, we're not saying that, but I trust that what y'all are saying are true because you're saying it in the moment. But Chelsea is the same way with this season, and it's all somehow worse because she gets less screen time than them, and is winning challenges and, is basically a duo with Kellen. And I forget that Chelsea is there most of the time, which is crazy. And she makes it fairly far into the game. I think final eight or nine. Um, I'm not going to ask you, why do you think they did that to Chelsea? Because we don't know. But you brought up earlier, like, sometimes you have to sacrifice certain people's edits because of the story you're trying to tell. And I absolutely get that. But we got Sebastian more than we got Chelsea. And I mean, Sebastian has Drew Christie face. No, he has Alec Christie face most of the season, and everyone knows what I'm talking about. Derp face. Why couldn't we get spread the wealth a little bit?
Yeah, I feel like Chelsea for me is probably, in terms of like a character on the season, she's probably the biggest question mark I have. Where I feel like editing her more fixes so much of like the problem of this season. Like she's winning challenges, people are calling her a threat. She has ties in the game. She's trying to make things happen, and we hear it from other people, like you said, and not from her. And it just confuses me because like I feel like the editors were struggling so hard to like find other people doing things like that were notable. And if obviously we don't know, but if somebody is like out there doing things, trying to make things happen, like why would they not give that person like a voice? Like I was saying, like if someone's gonna make something happen in the game, give them the voice to like make their move like known. So I honestly really don't know what went wrong with her. People might think that she did something bad to production, or I don't know, because that's the only way you play a decent game and get completely like purpled. So I really have no idea what went wrong with her or why they felt like she didn't deserve to at least have her perspective shown.
Yeah, and my guess was she wasn't good TV like CGI Bread. Maybe like her confessionals are what we get. I listened. CGI Brett, he's a legend on his own, so like I won't compare them. Ryan, how do we fix this twist?
I'm
We
so glad you
both
asked.
agree. Yeah, we agree that it's a good twist. How do you fix it?
I think we have to address kind of the biggest reason why it fell flat. And for me, that was just the cast and the game that this particular cast decided to play. You know, especially like on a season that's just so defined by kind of two people just controlling everything, and other people are kind of scared to make a move. Going to Ghost Island and not being able to play, kind of denying people with the ammunition that they could have to kind of take down the top dogs is really unfortunate. And one change I would make, one, let the player decide whether they want to play the game or not, because why send them to an island and basically say like you have to go. It kind of reminded me like recently in Survivor 46 where Liz and Ben and Bonnie went on the journey and they're like, you're going to do a rock draw, one of you is going to go back to camp. And it's like, why are you doing this? Like,
Why
just
why are we doing it?
yeah. So I think letting the player choose, especially when you have written on there, like it really reinforces the motto, like one bad decision can haunt you forever. And when you can't make the decision, like what are you really doing with this? Also, I think something that they could have incorporated, I mentioned earlier that I think Ghost Island reminded me a lot of like the new era in terms of like people going to the island and kind of playing a game. I would have loved to see where maybe they could send one person from each tribe going together to Ghost Island and kind of maybe having like a summit similar to the new era. I feel like, especially on a season that's like so defined by like tribal lines and staying Navidi strong and like, no, we have to stick to we have to be loyal to our tribe. I think having like people from the other tribe at least like interact in like a non-tribal setting where they can maybe say like, hey, like I'll help you out and then maybe we'll connect back at the merge. Like basically what era, if that had happened, on a season like this, I feel like it could have maybe accelerated the gameplay. People could have made connections that weren't really as known. It just would have helped kind of like give a jump start to the gameplay by the other cast that really it just didn't have.
And I will say that I know I shit on this for game changers. The fact that I don't like when they do more than one swap, but I do understand the reasoning behind them doing two swaps because you're trying to mix up the game enough that, and they do it again this season with a cast of 20 and all that. And it doesn't work out that way. It does, like, tribe lines stay the same with the exception of like Laurel. Tribe lines really stay the same for the most part through both the swaps and into the merge. I think that's why Navidi Strong is such a large meme in the deep Survivor community. It's because they pulled off Navidi Strong in a season where tribal lines, and James says this during the first or second swap, where he says, we didn't tribes. We should be going based off of the connections that we are making with these people. And I was like, yes, you are right. You don't pick the people that you start off with, and you make the connections while you're there. But the swaps are made so that you are pulling people. Dom and Wendell did that amazingly with Laurel, and vice versa. No one else was really trying to do that. And James is sitting there saying, hey, we don't have to do this. We could find another way. And that is so frustrating to hear him say that, knowing full well that's not what's going to happen. And we have to watch the rest of the season knowing that's not going to happen. And as far as how I would fix the Ghost Island twist, I would say that it's pretty much what you said. Like I said, I don't think they could do it again because all the twists got reused. Maybe even having, I mean, I don't know how much money it would cost, but like, they brought Cochran back for Game Changers. Hey, Eric is going to sit like on Ghost Island. Eric's going to sit with you and say, like, just talk to you about the game while he gives you this necklace or something like that. Just make it more fun. Make it more fun.
Well, it's like one possible, like, that sounds great in theory, but I feel like with that, like, one possible downside I'm thinking of that, like, right now is like, one, it kind of like, I feel like it would kind of add to like the so-called like corniness you mentioned earlier with Eric like sitting there. And two, like, it almost becomes like kind of like an Island of the Idols, which I'm so fortunate I do not have to go over that season with you when you do it in 3 days, but you'll see what I mean. It's like corny. It's great to see, like, obviously a former player come back, but I like how they did it with Cochran, where it's just he kind of appeared for a bit. We got to see him. He gave his advice, and then he went on his way.
And then he's gone.
Having the same person, maybe if they brought like multiple players back, I don't know.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, like for every advantage, they have that person presented to them. Say, just have a segment, and then they're gone. Just like that. They don't have to live out there. But I feel like that would be more appealing. And then that way, when they are showing those flashbacks to the scenes, you see the flashback and it's like, and now I'm sitting here actually talking to this person all these years later. Yes, it's corny, but who cares? It's a corny season. Jeff even references it in the finale. He's like, yeah, I know some people thought it was corny, but it's like, no, it is corny. This is a corny concept. And sometimes corny can be fun. Like Pearl Island is a corny concept. Because, we're pirates, and Rupert is a corny person, but like Rupert becomes compelling because they want him to become compelling. Corny doesn't always have to be bad, but I think in this situation, it is very bad.
Yeah, I agree with what you said about like kind of the Pearl Island situation where it's kind of like they're leaning into this theme a bit. But I think like, especially like for a new school season where like the theme is like part of the gameplay and they want like this kind of twist to like influence the game, when it doesn't really do that, it just makes it look worse than it would have. Like, I feel like had the twist kind of worked out, I feel like maybe some of like the animosity in terms of the corniness would have been taken away, because it's like, well, at least like it's impacting the game, like it could be a good twist. But since it didn't do that, all you're left with is just none of the gameplay and all of the corniness, and you're like, well, like, why did we really do this?
Okay, so I want to touch on the tie itself and how the votes broke down, because it's one of these situations where half the jury, the first 5 people, in fact, vote for Dom, and the last 5 plus Laurel all vote for Wendell. Like it's very straight down the line. And I do feel like because more people got to spend more time with Wendell towards the end of the game, where it did seem like Dom was becoming more antagonistic, specifically at tribal councils, I can see how it split that evenly. Obviously I understand why Laurel voted for Wendell in the situation because they were closer. The actual tie itself, one, were you shocked? Two, did you feel like one person actually did outperform the other at finale, or did you feel like, this is even? I get why this went like this.
Yeah, so watching the tie, when Jeff walks back with the urn and says, I'm going to read the votes. At first, like the jury members, I didn't believe him. And then he pulls it. I was like, oh my God, it's like actually happening. And when he pulled out the votes, I kind of knew it was going to be a tie because, I obviously before New Era, like, why else would you do that?
Yeah.
What I wasn't expecting is, obviously, despite me maybe not being super high on Laurel on her game, I thought it was going to be a 3-way tie. And then I realized it can't be a 3-way tie because there are 10 people in the jury. Yeah. So when it was a 2-way, because like the concept of like having one juror, like the last finalist, vote for the other two seemed like so like impossible to me that like I was like, it can't possibly be. And then it was. So in terms of like the tie itself, I feel like it's so interesting. I feel like I touched on this the last time we spoke about this season, but it just shows like Dom and Wendell, like they're both so different. Like even Wendell mentions it, like Dom was like the more bombastic, out there, big character, big moves, like the poster guy. And Wendell's the more laid back, social guy. And I feel like he kind of emphasizes on that. I think it just goes to show like the two like big like facets of the game, the strategic game and the social game, can like quite literally like even up at the final tribal council. But when that's that one juror who's gonna, or at least the last finalist is gonna decide, I feel like it just shows like a theme we've seen so many times, which is like the social player is always, not always, but usually going to win. And also like I feel like in terms of Laurel's perspective, because she was close with both of them, I think it was just like the power of like just voting for the person who you like more. It really just comes down to that. Because you can argue that like Wendell was more social with other players, but in terms of Dominic and Wendell, like they both were like forming that relationship with with Laurel very early on. You can't say like anyone like had a better game bond with Laurel, but I feel like maybe she just felt a more personal bond with Wendell, and I feel like that really just like gave him the edge. And I think it's super underrated about Survivor and just voting in general. Like it really does come down to just kind of voting for who you like more and just maybe kind of justifying that with like some kind of rationale.
Yeah, and I feel like it is almost 100% impulsive. I mean, we don't know how long it took but you just sat there and realized you just lost. Like you are not going to win. The entire time you're in attack mode during final tribal, you're trying to prove your game, you're trying to refute things that are going on. You're not thinking that you have to vote. So then all of a sudden you lose, and really the only thing you can go on, like you said, is who do I like more? Because I probably wasn't really listening to what these two people were saying because I was so stuck on what I needed to say to prove to the jury. And now my game is done and I just have to make this decision. And I do feel like you said, because she just liked him more. Because I do feel like they did have that connection. And Dom brought her to the end. He didn't make her go to fire. And I want to touch on that in a second, but I do feel like, that is a very rough spot. And she says at the reunion, that's a very impossible choice to make in that moment. And it's very similar to how they do the reunions now, where they do interviews with these people right after they've lost. All these people are thinking is my body's in shock. I don't know what to do and I don't know what to say. I'm just gonna just say. And so it's I won't say it's annoying. It's compelling. It's interesting. But I do want to talk about the urn thing. So Dom gets this the advantage, or not really an advantage. but he gets to pick what urn Jeff pulls the votes from, and he can pick from 3 iconic seasons. Australian Outback, which I tweeted this out earlier, is it's iconic. It's for nostalgic reasons, but it's iconic because it's season 2. Kagayan, which is iconic just because it's iconic, and Game Changers, which happened. And he's like, "Oh, who made the worst mistake?" And in my head, I'm like, "Okay, I understand Colby making a mistake. I understand Wu making a mistake. I don't understand Brad Culpepper. Like, it wasn't like Brad Culpepper made this all-time blunder by bringing Sarah to the end. And I'm crazy that they were trying to make it that way. But we get the Kagayan urn there, and at the reunion, no, after he loses, Probst is like, "Oh, did you make $1 million mistake by taking the wrong urn and not going to fire with Wendell?" And I forgot about that because we're only 2 seasons now into the mandatory fire making at Final Four. I didn't realize, I didn't remember that it is referenced here that it is a strategy to take the necklace off and go to fire against the person next to him. And we don't actually see it for 2 seasons. But I think that's great that it's already there as like, oh, we can do that. And I think that, spoilers, when Chris does that seasons from now, that is the move. That is the move of the season. If Natalie does that in Winners at War and does it against Tony, that is the move of the season. It doesn't happen here. And I still think that Dom had a very good chance at winning. I don't think that Dom, oh yeah, you have to take out Wendell here because yeah, he wins, but it's not one of these like all-time blunders because the vote tied. It tied. It did.
Well, at the end of the day, like Wendell does win. Whether you win in a landslide or win with a tie vote. I mean, if I lost in a tie vote, I feel like it would just feel that much worse because it was like.
Would you feel it was a blunder on your end though? Like, do you feel like this was a blunder on his end?
I mean, well, obviously it's a mistake, but I don't see it as an all-time blunder. Just because. I mean, I don't even know if I would have done the same thing in his position, even risking fire, like to go out when you have played such an impressive game that's being pretty much acknowledged to your face the whole time. Like, this guy's playing a good game. Like, this is the guy to beat. We need to take this guy out. I feel like Dominic maybe wasn't anticipating Wendell's more social game as having a big of an impact as it did at Final Tribal. So, I mean, yes, it was a mistake, but like you said, like we're just 2 seasons in, and like I don't even know if the Ghost Island people like knew about this twist because HHH had just filmed like a month before. So like they didn't even get to see a season where this twist kind of plays out. So like it was like basically new to them. And so his idea of like giving away immunity and risking that is like so outlandish, especially like on a season like Ghost Island, where the last guy to give away immunity got blasted off the airlock. And he's basically like the face of the season, or basically like the face of the twist. And now like even the possibility of you doing the same thing, it's like you can't even consider that. So I completely understand why like he wouldn't do that. But obviously hindsight is 2020, and maybe it would have been the better decision to risk that.
No, okay, and I can't disagree with that. We're gonna start to wrap up. It's so crazy not having 2 questions to end this now, but I guess I'll give my final thoughts on the season. My final thoughts on the season are it's boring. It's boring. It is, and I don't know if it's burnout, and it could be. It could just be burnout, but I don't feel like I'm going to feel this way tomorrow with David versus Goliath. I honestly just think that I was just very bored today with watching it. And there's nothing wrong with that, but what are your final thoughts on the season?
I agree. Like the gameplay as it goes on, it does get a bit more and more disappointing as the episodes go on, and we see people have opportunities to make moves but just don't quite do it. However, like I said at the very beginning, like I'm somebody who can like always kind of see the bigger picture and like kind of just appreciate the things that we do get. Like it shows one of the most like powerful duos of all time, getting to the end together, both with quite literally an equal shot to win, a story that is very rarely ever seen and we'll probably never get again. So, like, there is some merit. It does tell a great story, and those two people like have their gameplay like completely put on display, even at the cost of other people. So, like, I'm at least glad that we did get to see such like strong players have their cases shown. So, kind of by the time we got to Final Tribal, it was like, wow, like these are two really good contenders, and they're gonna fight out for the win. And like we as viewers know why each of them deserve to win. So, I it has its faults, but at the end of the day, there are still some positives. It is technically a historic season, so
Yeah,
we'll
yeah,
leave it at
that's
that.
very fair. I'm gonna give Ghost Island a 2.5 out of 5. I'm gonna put it right below Worlds Apart, which is insane that I have anything, and right above Redemption Island. So right now it's 33rd out of 36 for me. Final question, and you kind of touched on this earlier. A couple people from this season, not including the winner, that you would want to see back for 50.
So, number one, very obvious, Dominic. Would love to see him back. Obviously, like the closest we have ever had to a winner. And unfortunately, though, I don't know how well he would do, being such a big threat that he is. So I don't know how well he's gonna do, especially now that people like know his game. Like his game was displayed so well that like people are gonna be very wary of him. But I would still obviously love to see him. I would also love to see Donathan back. If we're going to have someone from the Donathan Laurel duo, I would like it to be Donathan because I'm always going to love to see the player who's at least trying to make something happen. And I would love to see how he does if he maybe gets put in a better position at the start with just the right people who maybe would have, played a bit harder. And I'd love to see how he kind of works with other people who are more like-minded like him, who are saying, let's make something happen. Another player, I mean, as a character, I would love to see Chris Noble come back. I don't know how much that is warranted. Same way with Jacob Derwin, would love to see him back. I don't know how warranted a return is. We have many other better players who I guess are waiting in line to take that spot. But yeah, I think those are the three that really like stick out in my mind.
I would have three too. I would have Dom, obviously. I'd have Donathan, and I would have Kellen, who we didn't even really touch on tonight, but like I really liked Kellen this season. I think that she was very interesting, and I remember the first time watching this season, I'm like, oh, she's the villain. She's not the villain. Like she's not. Like she has one moment, and she was rightly annoyed after the family visit, and that's pretty much it. I know she is one of the big Nabidi strong folks. Um, but no, I would say Dom, Donathan, and Kellen. With yes, honorable mention to Jacob Derwin because if you ever do a pre-merge versus post-merge thing, I'd throw my hat in for Jacob Derwin almost every day of the week. Um, yeah, yes, Kellen probably would take the Hannah spot. That's I won't deny that. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. It's been like you said, it's been 2 years. We have you coming back in a few days, or is it next week? What day is it?
Next week for 45.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, for the final week. Um, which is crazy that we're getting into it. But Ryan, thank you so much. Thank you to the people in the chat for sticking with this, especially for Ghost Island. We will be back tomorrow night for No, we'll be back tomorrow night for David vs. Goliath. And I think that's it. So we will see you guys on the other side.